We were only supposed to stay in that old house for a few days. It was just a temporary place. My parents kept telling me that once the renovations were finished, we would move back home. So that night, when I was alone in the living room, I kept telling myself the same thing. Just a few more days. That was all. But I didn't know that the place I should have been afraid of wasn't the room upstairs. It wasn't the dark hallway either. It was the couch I was lying on. Because when I put my head down on the pillow, I felt something hard and cold underneath it. I thought it was the remote, so I lifted the pillow, and I saw a hand. It started that summer. I was 13 at the time, and our house was being renovated. The rooms were torn apart, and there was no way we could live there. So my parents rented an old house for us to stay in. It was an old house near the edge of a small town. From the outside, it looked normal. 2 floors, pale gray walls, and a large maple tree in the front yard. The landlord said the house had been empty for a few months, but the furniture was still inside, so we could move in right away. I didn't like it the first time I walked in. It wasn't dirty. Actually, it was the opposite. It had been cleaned pretty well, but it didn't feel like a new house. It felt like a lot of old things had just been wiped down, just enough to look normal. In the living room, there was an old, dark brown couch. The fabric felt stiff, and whenever you sat on it, it made a low, muffled sound. The couch faced the TV, and there was a floor lamp beside it. My parents didn't care. To them, it was just an old house. At that time, I was really into horror games. That afternoon, I finally got to play one I had wanted to try for a long time. I wasn't scared while I was playing because my parents were downstairs, the TV was on, and I could hear my mom cooking in the kitchen. Around 9 that night, my mom got a phone call. Something had happened with my grandmother, and my parents had to drive over there. It wasn't close, so they said they probably wouldn't be back until the next morning. They asked if I would be okay staying home by myself. Of course, I said yes. A 13-year-old boy always thinks he is braver than he really is, especially in front of his parents. Before they left, my dad checked the locks and told me not to open the door for strangers. He told me to call if anything happened. Then they drove away. The moment the front door closed, the whole house became quiet. I went back to my room and tried to keep playing the game. But as soon as the screen lit up, all I could think about were the scenes from earlier that day. I lasted less than 10 minutes before I turned it off. But after I turned it off, I couldn't sleep. So I grabbed my pillow and went downstairs to the living room. I turned on the TV, lowered the volume, and found some random late-night show. I thought that as long as the TV stayed on, I wouldn't feel so scared. I lay down on the old couch, put the pillow under my head, and stared at the screen. At first, it was fine. People were talking on the TV, and those voices made the house feel less silent. But later that night, I started to get sleepy. The picture on the TV became blurry. That was when I heard footsteps. They were very quiet. They came from the other side of the living room. At first, I thought the sound was coming from the TV. I picked up the remote and lowered the volume. The footsteps were still there, and now they were clearer. They weren't coming from the TV. They were inside the living room. It sounded like someone barefoot was slowly walking in from the hallway. I woke up instantly. I didn't move. I just stared at the TV and pretended I hadn't heard anything. But the footsteps kept getting closer to the couch. Then they stopped beside me. I could feel something standing there, right behind my head. I held my breath and waited. Nothing happened. After a while, I finally forced myself to sit up and turn around. There was nothing there. I turned on all the lights downstairs and even used my phone flashlight to check under the couch. There was only a deep shadow, some dust, and a few old things. I stood in the living room and tried to explain it to myself. Maybe the sound had come from upstairs. Maybe it was just the old wood in the house. Or maybe I had scared myself because of the horror game. After thinking that, I felt a little better. I turned off a few lights, left only the TV and the floor lamp on, and lay back down on the couch. But the moment I put my head on the pillow, something felt wrong. There was something under it. I thought the remote had fallen underneath, so I pushed myself up and lifted the pillow. Then I saw a hand. A pale hand was sticking out from the gap in the couch, pressed right under my pillow. I couldn't move. For a second, my mind didn't even understand what I was looking at. I just stared at it. Then the hand slowly moved, and it began to pull back. I finally screamed and rolled off the couch onto the floor. The hand jerked back, as if my scream had startled it. Then it disappeared under the couch. After that, the only sound in the living room was the TV. I don't know how long I sat there. Eventually, I grabbed a baseball bat from beside the floor lamp and forced myself to push the couch away. The couch was heavy, and its legs scraped loudly across the floor. But underneath it, there was only dust and a few coins that must have fallen there a long time ago. I couldn't stay in the living room after that. I ran upstairs to my bedroom, locked the door, pushed a chair against it, and sat there with the lights on until morning. My parents came back the next day. I told them what had happened. My mom's first reaction was that I must have had a nightmare. She said I shouldn't have been playing so many horror games, especially while staying alone in an old house. My dad didn't laugh at me. He just went downstairs, looked at the couch, and moved it away to check underneath. Of course, he didn't find anything. For the rest of the time we stayed there. I never slept in the living room again. Soon after that, we moved back into our renovated house. On the day we left the old house, I watched the movers carry our things out one by one, but the dark brown couch stayed in the living room. I asked my dad, "Aren't we taking that couch?" He frowned and said, "That's not ours. The landlord left it here." I didn't think much about it at the time. Not until a few months later, when my mom was looking through the rental paperwork. She suddenly said, "That's strange. The furniture list the landlord gave us doesn't mention a living room couch." When I heard that, I froze. Because I suddenly remembered the couch had already been there on the first day we moved in. But if it didn't belong to the landlord, and it didn't belong to us, then where did that hand under the couch come from that night?